Social media is flooded with reaction to former Chief Justice Mogoeng's apology for his controversial comments about Israel during a 2020 webinar. Now, on Thursday, Mogoeng issued a statement in which he apologized for his comments regarding South Africa's policy towards Israel. The apology comes after the Judicial Conduct Appeals Committee dismissed his appeal against the finding that he had involved himself in a political controversy. Now, the South African Zionist Federation said yesterday it was disappointed that Mogoeng had been forced to apologize. Joining me now to discuss his apology is Rashan Adadu from the Palestine Solidarity Alliance. A very good morning to you. Thank you so much for your time. What was your take on this statement and the apology? How did you hear it?
Good morning and thanks for inviting us. I'm actually the coordinator of the South African PBS Coalition. And as the coalition was one of the organisations that lodged a complaint against the Chief Justice, we do feel that his apology is a victory. We feel that his appeal was rejected and that now he's issued an apology, at least for his utterances made in the Jerusalem Post webinar. It shows that he is not above the law, and also that we can hold even the most powerful judicial officer in our country to account through the processes of the Judicial Service Commission.
When it comes to the entire process, Mogoeng essentially submitted himself to the process of the law and allowed his views to be challenged. And the questions around what he apologized for in terms of retracting some of his comments and apologizing for some of them, what stood out in that statement as the apology came forth?
Well, we totally accept the first 2 points in his statement that he has apologized for. But, if you read the whole preamble to his statement, we certainly are not pleased that he has not renounced, he clearly states this, his love for Israel and for Palestine, as he puts it. And we really hope that the Chief Justice will understand that there are not two equal sides, Israel and Palestine, in conflict, that he will understand and accept that Israel is a settler colonial state and it is an apartheid state. As you know, Palestinians, many eminent South Africans, such as our dearly missed Archbishop Tutu, have long been saying. And even this week, the week he made the apology in, on Tuesday, another respected international human rights organization, Amnesty International, issued a report, and just in its title, it's called Israel's Apartheid Against Palestinians. So, he's refusing to accept that he is in fact expressing love for an apartheid state. And that is a problem, and that's something that we certainly want to keep explaining and talking to people about. Because when we see that even the little land that remains for Palestinians is being further Bantustanized, if you can call it that, taken over. Just this week we've seen home demolitions in Jerusalem and the West Bank. We've seen the destruction of entire communities in the Nakab, with the Negev desert. And there they want to eliminate these communities in order to plant alien trees, which can only be seen as ethnic cleansing. I think if you want to just erase the traces of the indigenous Palestinian people in their entirety, that's the only word for it. So when, again, he says he's not apologizing for his love for Israel, he is not apologizing for saying that he loves an apartheid state.
And he says he's only apologizing for himself in the political controversy, which really now speaks to the very thin line between understanding Israel, the apartheid state, and Israel in the Bible on the grounds of Christianity, love and forgiveness. How does this conversation move forward and become perhaps a debate that needs to be understood on both sides of this angle?
Well, that's the other point that, yes, as you say, he refuses to acknowledge. And it's important that we understand that it is not also, as well as it not being a conflict of two equal sides, that it's not a religious conflict. And in fact, the Palestinian people are both Muslims and Christians, which is what the Chief Justice claims to be a Christian. And as Muslims and Christians, both sections of the religious ethics of the Palestinian people suffer at the hands of Israeli apartheid. And it's the Palestinian Christian community who's also calling on us to recognize Israel as an apartheid state and as the international community to isolate it for that reason, to impose boycotts, divestments and international sanctions, as was done to apartheid South Africa by the international community to support our liberation movements and our anti-apartheid resistance. So I think it's very important to understand that the Palestinian people are also Christians. So if he's claiming to speak in the name of Christianity and to invoke a lot of biblical references, then he should try to see that what's actually happening there is his very own Christian people, Palestinian people, are suffering at the hands of Israeli apartheid and are, together with the Muslim Palestinian communities, calling on us to isolate Israel as an apartheid state.
How is this issue of political controversy meant to be understood, as Mogoeng spoke about it and apologized for it in that capacity, outside perhaps of the bigger common agreement that needs to take place with regards to Israel?
Well, as the South African BDS coalition, we took this matter up not because we wanted to prove a legal point, but actually because we wanted to prove a political point. And the fact that he has apologized for his utterances, I think, is a step forward. It did also, of course, show that we can use these judicial service commission processes in order to, as ordinary people in the country, raise up issues to the extent that he has been forced to apologize. When you remember, he did say he would never do so, although he claims that he has not apologized for what he said subsequent to the webinar that we took him to task for. But I think it's important to understand that it is a political issue. As I was saying, if as Christians, if as people who understand as South Africans and were part of the struggle against apartheid here, we need to see Israel, we need to recognize Israel as an apartheid state. We need to, in that sense, see that we mustn't say, that in expressing love for Israel, we are expressing love for an apartheid state. And that we are not fulfilling any biblical prophecy by doing so. In fact, if you look at the report that was just published by Amnesty International, which is an impartial and well-respected human rights organization globally, they clearly see that Israel's apartheid started with the formation of the state when the land was stolen from the Palestinian people, stolen violently and through expelling people from that land. And that's the situation. It's not a complicated situation. And in that sense, it's not controversial. What was controversial was that he was making utterances at the time that actually contravened even what our government's position towards the Palestinian situation is.
Very well. Thank you so much for weighing in on this discussion, Rashan Adadu, who is with the Palestine Solidarity Alliance.